City Council. A copy of the Open Meetings Act is located in the rear of the council chambers. The meeting today is part of the ongoing development of the 2024 city budget. The mayor submitted a proposed budget to the council on June 13th. City departments provided further details and information at two council meetings held June 21st and 22nd. By resolution, council members submitted initial tentative changes that were discussed on July 11th and voted on July 13th. Two proposals were approved to move forward from that vote. The city budget public hearing was held on Monday, August 1st. By resolution, council members submitted. Oh, here we go. Thank you. Whoops. Right. Thank you.
That's nice alliteration there.
Yeah, that helped. Let's see. The city budget public hearing was held on Monday, August 1st. By resolution, council members submitted final proposed budget changes to the budget office by 3 p.m. last Friday, August 5th. 4 changes were proposed along with 2 tentative proposals that were approved previously. The 6 proposed changes were delivered by the budget office to all council members as well as posted online. Today we will discuss those changes. Later this week on Wednesday, August 10th at 10 a.m. we will vote on the proposed changes. Proposals with 4 votes to approve will then be sent to City Law for preparation as budget amendments to consider at the budget vote on Monday, August 22nd. The order of business today is as follows. The items will be taken in order number 1 through number 6. I will read the proposed change submitted to the budget office and invite the council member who submitted it to speak about their proposal. Then I will invite any comments from council members as well as any questions for the proposer or city staff. As a reminder, we will not be voting on any of these items today. That will occur in 2 days on Wednesday, August 10th at 10 a.m. in these same council chambers. With that, I will read the first proposal. Number 1, submitted by Council Member Shob, transfer $250,000 in fiscal year 22-23 and $250,000 in fiscal year 23-24 from general fund reserves to the urban development budget to enhance housing programs and neighborhood revitalization with a focus on items 1, 2, 14, 48, and 49 in the Lincoln Climate Action Plan. These funds may be used to educate and incentivize individuals who are in the process of replacing heating and cooling systems of the value and benefit of considering a high efficiency system as a replacement option. Councilman Shob, would you like to speak on your proposal?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the council entertaining this idea, and this is, as you'll notice, slightly different than the original proposal 2 weeks ago. After speaking with members of the council and members of the public, I made some modifications. I'd like to thank everyone for their input. That was very helpful. The purpose or the focus of my submitted adjustment to the budget is to draw a little bit more attention to our climate action plan. And one of the things that my friends in urban development are currently doing is helping with housing revitalization, and often they help people replace furnaces and cooling systems that are failing. In the process of that, I'd like to be able to offer some assistance to help those individuals who need assistance to install more efficient systems. And we can also talk about the education process of how we can be more efficient in our heating and cooling and reduce our carbon footprint. The program's already in place. This will be kind of an assist to that program, so there'll be very little new FTEs or bureaucracy. Mr. Marvin has experience at doing this, and he's also worked with LES and other agencies to be more efficient and assist our residents. I hope you'll support this.
Thank you, Councilman Shob. Are there any questions from any of the council members regarding this proposal or for staff? Councilwoman Raybold.
I just want to say thank you to Councilman Shob. I think these are great changes that you have made, and I think working with urban development is a real outstanding choice We've had discussions about how best to do revitalization with our existing housing stock and trying to provide incentives to our very good landlords out there so that they can take advantage of financial assistance programs that'll make it easier for them to upgrade a system in the housing complex. And so this is an exciting thing, and I think it really addresses two key areas and goals of the city, affordable housing and maintaining that base, but also, as we are well aware of our climate change and our climate action plan, this really ties in so nicely to both those, and I am truly very supportive of this initiative, and we'll vote yes when we vote on it on Wednesday, and then I won't have to talk about it.
Any further comments from the council? Councilman Beckius.
Yes, a few questions. Councilman Shob, this would also still include heat pumps as an option, correct? Okay.
Yeah, heat pumps I would consider a high efficiency
Yep.
system.
Okay. And then I'm assuming that from Councilwoman Raybold's comments, does not have an owner-occupied requirement. This could go into rental housing. This could be installed by a landlord, anyone who's replacing a heating and cooling system.
Yes, my original thoughts were individuals, single-family homeowners, but as in talking with people in the public and my council and some others, there are projects currently ongoing where we're looking at neighborhood revitalizations, and we're encouraging landlords who are revitalizing apartment buildings. I think by putting individuals in there rather than people, well, I hope the word individuals is vague enough that it covers both single-family and multifamily units.
Thank you.
Are there other questions from the council or comments? Councilwoman Washington.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have any questions for you, Councilman Shob. I want to thank you very much for working and listening to public and other council members, and I will be able to support this willingly and enthusiastically when it comes to a vote before us.
Thank you.
Any further comments at all? Okay. All right. With that, we'll move on to proposal number 2, submitted by Councilmember McGinnis. You would think after all this time. I am sorry. Proposal number 2, remove vacant City Council Research Analyst Accountant, 1 FTE for $94,157 in fiscal year 22-23 and $98,465 in fiscal year 23-24 to fund the City Clerk's Senior Office Assistant 1 FTE for $65,084 and in fiscal year 22-23 and $68,037 in fiscal year 23-24. Remaining funds of $29,073 in fiscal year 22-23 and $30,000 $428 in fiscal year 23-24 to be used for education and training in the City Council budget. Reduce general fund reserves by $65,084 in fiscal year 22-23 and $68,037 in fiscal year 23-24. Councilman McGinnis, would you like to speak on your proposal?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. The idea of this was that this is a position that's been vacant for quite some time in the City Council. And I thought that instead of having to add a position, a new FTE to the general fund for the city clerk, that we could move our position over there. Little did I know there was a lot of savings that was going to be brought in, a little more. And I've also figured out we still would like to keep some money aside for education and in events that the City Council would like and need to go to at some point. So that's where we would leave this extra money in here. And I'd still like to, I don't know if Sherry is available. Is there amount, a carryover that the City Council has in their fund at this point?
So currently, an accumulation of all prior years reappropriated funds. The balance is $193,286. So. The reapprop has accumulated largely from that vacant position.
mostly been left over from that vacant
Yes.
position. Okay, so I'd like to move it over and give the city clerk then the FTE, so that will reduce, I thought it would reduce our general fund balance. Is that correct? Because it says in here, oh, it will reduce general fund reserves,
Let me think about this.
should be balanced.
Okay, so, yes, we'll call it balances,
You-
because it is essentially the balances from the general fund that are
Reduce,
appropriated.
that's what you
rather
call that
than
category?
adjusting our property tax or our sales tax projections. We have a appropriation of balances at this point, and so it's much easier accounting-wise to reduce those balances to reflect the savings rather than to adjust the property tax or the sales tax
That'd be
projections.
fine with me, yeah, that'd be fine too. Hope it's fine with them too.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments on this proposal, Councilman Bowers?
Yeah, I thank you, Richard, for bringing this up. I struggle to support this, and the reason why is because I think that the city of Lincoln expects elected officials to be responsive and efficient in handling needs that come up. I also think that the general consensus in the public is that they're not aware that most of us have jobs outside of being on the city council to help make ends meet or to even just have health insurance. As the youngest council member with probably the least flexible schedule of anyone up here, I think over the past 3 years, if this position had been filled, I think that while I'm proud of what I've been able to get done over the past 3 years, I think that this would have been able to help me take it to the next level. And hopefully when folks get elected onto the council who come from a similar background, having this position would help them also. So I think that this would help future council members be the very best council members that they can be in serving the community. I also hear the statement that, you know, if we need it in the future, then we can put it back in. I struggle with that because anytime we add a new position, there's always this battle that happens on if that position's really needed. And so I'm worried that taking it out is a lot easier than just putting it back in if we do need it.
Other comments or questions? Councilwoman Raybold.
You know, I do like this idea. We know that Sunny in the city clerk's office does need additional support. We've heard great testimony from the amazing upgrades that she's done and improvements to that department. And if Sunny has that additional assistance, I know that she can just run with it and do make more efficiencies. I guess I feel like I'm the oldest one serving on the city council. And so we've talked about it and struggled with this position for years. I have to tell you, in my experiences, I reach out to the departments, the department directors, and they have been responsive, receptive. If I give them enough heads up, because like they're doing a million other things, and I'm just another request on top of it. But if I'm patient with them, because I know they have a full workload, they're tremendous in giving me the research and the guidance and the expertise I need to be able to make better decisions. And I certainly have a tremendous respect for them and the work that they do, and I have learned and have been humbled by how much they do know, and they are the experts in the field. So I feel that it's money better spent on helping educate us, the city council members, and for training. I can tell you that one of the best conferences I ever went to was when I was a county commissioner, National Association of County Officials. To be able to go to that and work with my colleagues from other states, I learned so much. And I think that's a great idea for city council members. You know, we've gone through financial ups and downs, and we never had funding to send people to conferences. Like the League of Municipalities, I've been paying more and more attention to the League of Municipalities, and it is chock full of valuable information on how I can do my job better too. And there are resources out there, and I'd rather see city council members participate in the League of Municipalities and the national version as well. I think because there's this synergy of really great best practices that are going on that we could bring back and figure out, okay, let's do it the Lincoln way. these are great ideas and how we can get them implemented. And so, I mean, I was so excited talking to the delegation from Oregon, where they actually implemented legislation to prohibit unfunded mandates in the legislature. And this is something that Senator Carol Blood has done. Don't mean to go on, but I think it is invaluable to all of us so that we could have innovative ideas and learn from that. And would I have taken advantage of it? Maybe or maybe not, because, you know, like you said, we have full-time jobs outside of this, and so that sort of limits us. But, you know, I hope we get the next generation of city council members up here, and I would really find it so essential to be able to say, we have a budget now that you can travel and go to these conferences near and maybe even far, but you learn so much. I mean, you learn so much, and I think that is money well spent. And then I would, you know, I think when new city council members go through orientation, and I know many of the department directors are there, they can be really good mentors and coaches as well to say, you know, I can get to this issue. And honest, I am humbled by their expertise and all the things that I have learned from them, and how to be a better city council person. So I like this idea of funding, of course, Sonny's assistance, but also on the city council. And then we don't have to deal with the FTE.
Any other comments? Councilwoman Washington.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple of questions. I think this is a creative idea. I have looked at that empty position for a while and wondered why we don't fill it, how long has it been empty? And so I do have that question for someone in budget, maybe, or someone who's been around for a while. But how long has that position been vacant?
I'm going to turn to John. I would need to do some research
Okay.
to figure out for sure, but it's been at least 3 years.
I don't think it's ever filled, was it?
Yeah.
Has it ever been filled?
It has not.
No, this
Okay.
was going on when John Kemp was here, right?
Oh, okay. I remember, like, in a previous generation,
Yeah.
calling on a council person when I was not involved, and they had an assistant, and I remember thinking, wow, they have an assistant. And it seemed like there were probably more than one in the office, but it is, like I said, been a generation.
Right. I can remember many, many years ago, council members had a small amount, I'm thinking maybe $5,000 of discretionary funds.
Yeah.
And some of them had their own interns at that point of time. I'll also admit I've been here so long that I can remember the last time the council had a staff member, but that's been many, many years ago.
Yeah, we might be thinking of the same era, but okay, thank you. So I guess because that position's been vacant for a long time, and because I think we are always challenged by the fact that we have full-time jobs, of managing staff, that I hesitate, though I think part of me dreams about having somebody else doing research. But as Councilwoman Raybould has said, I feel very comfortable talking to directors and asking them for the information that I need. And so I think for a small amount of give back, we can make a big effort, a big impact in the city clerk's office. And they do so much work for so many of our residents that I really support giving the residents that customer service and interface with the clerk's office. And we'll just use our money in other ways. So, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Councilman Bowers.
Yeah, I would just like to respond to a couple of things, you know, and it kind of falls in line with, you know, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. In the budget, there already is a position to add a person into the city clerk's office. So it's not an either or situation. And in terms of interacting with department leads, I absolutely agree. They are the experts, but it's more than just getting content from individuals. It's about navigating systems. It's about having that knowledge. It's about trying to come up with new and creative ideas and being able to develop those networks and those resources. And I'm super fortunate that I've had people like Councilwoman Ward, who's been a mentor to help me figure that out. But this isn't to supplant the information from department heads. It's to help us further develop policy ideas that come from constituents. And in terms of conferences, I absolutely agree. Conferences are important. If we have $190,000 in the city council reserves, I mean, that more than meets the $60,000 that would be put in to help pay for education. But I mean, if I'm being completely honest, I'm hesitant to go to a conference that would be paid for by the city based on political attack ads that could come after that saying that the city is funding these conferences. I don't agree with that. But if we're looking for education, we have money in the reserves. There's already a position in the budget to help fund an extra person in the city clerk's office, and this is not to supplant department heads. Again, as someone with the least restrictive or with the most restrictive schedule on the council, this position would have been a godsend over the past 3 years for me.
Any other questions or comments? Councilman McGinnis.
Real quick, a couple things that kind of came to me is when I was on the school board, I was always one that thought maybe going to the national conventions of school boards would be a waste of time, but I was more like Jane. Once I was there, I came up with more ideas, more thoughts that we were able to bring back instead of just being in our own little bubble. You do need to get out there and see what else is going on around. So I think that actually putting this money into that fund will maybe at least allow us to look at it. I disagree with my fellow council person, James Michael Bowers, that political attack ads, I don't think it should matter politically. You're doing what's best for the city. So, and I feel like it wouldn't bother me if someone said, oh, you're just going to that convention to do that or this. No, I know in my heart, and we all know that we're there to work and we're there doing good things. So I don't think politically, and then politically adding another position, we had that at the school board also. We were lowering the mill levy. Everyone said, well, what about next year when we need to raise the mill levy? They're going to come after us and say, you raised the mill levy, so you're charging more taxes. I don't think it mattered. I think we got to the point we could go out and ask for the money we needed, and they know we're a taxing authority. We can, when we feel like it's necessary, we can ask the taxpayers for those funds. And I just don't see it as a big deal that adding a position, if we really need it, and the whole city council agrees to it, that they can go add a position. And it may be something totally different than what we had here. But I think having $190,000 sitting in a fund is not doing the taxpayers any good. I think we need to stop funding that and move it over. And then when we need it, we'll be able to put it in our budget at that time.
Councilman Beckius.
I just wanted to thank Councilmember McGinnis for bringing this forward. If I think we've come to the realization that if we haven't filled this position in the years that it has been funded, that we probably have not determined that we have an adequate need or the ability to organize that position to be effective. So thank you for this change up. I'll support this.
Any other comments or questions? Councilwoman Raybold and then Councilman Bowers.
Maybe a question for Sherry and the staff. Do we have this structured as it needs to be structured for the budget? Is to match the intention?
Yes, I feel we do. Are there any questions about that?
No.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure that we were following the intent of it and we have it structured correctly, because sometimes
Exactly, there are
you know better
communication
than us.
problems. Exactly. No, Richard worked with us, and
Okay.
we feel comfortable with this. Thank you, Richard.
Councilman Bowers.
I got one question and then one comment. If for some reason this doesn't go through, Councilman McGinnis, would you feel comfortable putting some of the $190,000 that's in reserves to an education fund to address that concern?
I don't believe we need $190,000 for an education fund.
I'm not saying the whole amount, but the $60,000 that you're getting to here, if this position continues to be funded, would you feel comfortable using some of that money that's in the city council or reserves then to go into an education fund to meet that need?
Yeah, we could. And the other part of that is, then why don't we put all that money into the reserve and then go get it when we need it? And we ought to maybe get rid of the whole $190,000.
My next comment that I want to make is, when we had a turnover of staff here while I was chair on the council, I mean, that was a transition for the city council. And I think even having another person here would have made that transition a lot easier in terms of making sure that the council was supported and making sure that things were getting done. And so that's another reason why I think that this position is needed, is because who knows in the future when we're going to have another turnover of staff, and to place all of that on the council chair, that is a rotating position every year, I think is really hard. And so I think that, along with the other reasons of why I said that this position would be beneficial, I struggle to get on board. There's other things of yours that you bring up that I can get on board with. This one I struggle with a little bit, my friend.
I understand.
Any other questions or comments on this proposal from other colleagues? I would just like to add then that I am going to support this, and here's why. For me, it brings down, I've had a little trouble swallowing the 67 FTEs, and this is, I think, a good way to help pay for one of the proposed FTEs, which I do support for the city clerk's office. I think it's important. And because we haven't used it in a number of years, I also think it's a good use of our council staffing issues, especially with that amount of $192,000, which I think Councilman McGinnis's point about when that money sits there, that doesn't do anyone any good. So for that reason, I'll be supporting this proposal. So with that, we could move on to proposal number 3, also supported, submitted by Councilmember McGinnis. To freeze proposed health department fees for child care programs, bill number 22R-315, and the food code, bill number 22R-316, on the 8/1/22 city council agenda. Reduce health fund revenue by $20,000 in fiscal year 22-23 and $40,600 in fiscal year 23-24. Increase appropriation of the health fund balance $20,000 in fiscal year 22-23 and $40,600 in fiscal year 23-24. Councilman McGinnis.
Yes, I brought this forward mostly because we have been supporting these two very important items for our city of Lincoln. One, child care and having affordable, good child care, and the other one is helping to support our restaurants and our food establishments during the tough times. Even our catering and or social halls are all included in on this. So it's not a lot of money, I'm saying that, but I think it's a good way to show them that we're here to help them continue on their recovery at this point. Childcare is the one that is going to be ongoing. Hopefully we come out of a recession and people are back in the restaurants and such, but I just thought to freeze these fees for 2 years would be a good way to show support for them. I believe the health department can cover this in the meantime. Had a nice talk with the director, and at this point she believes that she can probably cover these because it's just a freeze. It's not an increase in these. I looked at all the fees moving forward, and there are a lot of them in here that I don't know, from body art fees going up to a lot of these, and I was proposing to bring them all and freeze them all so that a lot of our small businesses that have to pay these fees would be able to feel like the city's not trying to come out after them for more money. But I believe that mostly the child care and the food permits, that these are two that we need to freeze for now for at least 2 years.
Any questions or comments on this proposal? Councilwoman Washington.
Councilman McGinnis, thank you for bringing this forward. I was looking at I'd already made some notations about child care fees, and I think the health department was going to increase those by $5 in each of the budget years. But I don't have in my quick memory what the increase on food handlers permits was. Do you have that?
Yes, I do, if you'd like to look at them.
Yes.
They're right through there. And so from food handling to, food trucks to markets, farmers markets and all those. So they were raising the fees on a lot of that, and part of that to me is that, you know, food, I'm not going to get into it, but there's such things as food insecurity and people being able to purchase, and just raising the costs on the people that are trying to deliver that right now is I don't think is right.
So we're talking about freezing the increase on all food code.
Correct.
So we're talking about mobile food use, temporary food, the whole code.
The
Okay.
new permits, the renewals, the food trucks, catering, temporary food, like the pop-ups, as well as
Cottage food.
cottage. Well, cottage didn't raise; that stayed steady.
And the food handling permits.
But the food handling permits, the farmers markets. I guess with that, are these numbers correct that all of those increases in food permits total $20,000 in 1 year, and then double that? Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Raybold.
Well, I am incredibly supportive of any childcare, keeping it flat while people go through the struggles of inflation. And, you know, obviously I'm a grocer, and so I probably have to recuse myself, but I think it's a good idea to keep all food handlers and the numbers on even food trucks, et cetera, farmers market, just because of inflation going on right now. Every little bit would help, and I think this sends a terrific signal. You know, we're going to have daycare, childcare issues for years to come. I mean, this was going on even before the pandemic, and I just remember the stats that 211 daycare centers across the state of Nebraska closed, and even 100 more closed temporarily, and out of that 100, half of them closed permanently. So there's a huge need, and just the extraordinary steps on sanitation and other protocols that they had to put into place that are quite expensive on the daycare facilities, and the cost of reimbursement that they may get from some state, local, federal subsidies does not equal the cost of their operations. And so it's really important that if we could hold that flat, I'm certainly supportive of both, but certainly daycare is huge. Our workforce needs that in order to continue to have a vital workforce.
Councilman Shob.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm a little confused. You guys help me understand. These are agencies that have to be licensed and inspected by the health department, and they pay an annual fee, and we're gonna say, don't increase the annual fee for 2 years.
Right.
Okay, thank you. They're still gonna be licensed, they're still
Right.
gonna be inspected, they're gonna pay the same thing.
Yeah,
they're
no, they're still going to have to
gonna pay the
their
same thing they're
current fees.
currently paying. There's no increase for 2
Right.
years.
Other questions or comments? Councilman Shob, I'm sorry, were you done? Okay, I'm sorry, okay. Any other questions or comments on this? Okay, I would just say I'm going to support this because I do think it does signal a strong sense of support from the council. I also would like to say I think sometimes we forget that a lot of these businesses, whether they're childcare or food trucks or restaurants or whoever, pay more than one fee, and so we may think, you know, well, it's just $5 here or $5 there, but when in fact these businesses are paying more than one fee, and it does add up. And so especially in all of these settings, and then everybody's still, I believe, recovering from pandemic, and so I think it's a good idea, and I will support this as well. So with that, we can move on to proposal number 4, submitted by Councilmember McGinnis. Do not fund the health department's 1 FTE environmental health educator, 2 to address health issues due to changing climate. Councilman McGinnis.
Yeah, again, this was an attempt to remove another FTE addition to our budget. This FTE will basically be an educator to go around and talk about the planet's accelerated rate of climate change and what it poses the global threat, largest challenges. I just don't think that we need to be paying somebody from the city of Lincoln or from the health department to go around and be an educator on climate change at this point. kind of funny anecdote is I was talking to somebody that is at a nursing home, and they laughed. They said, so somebody's going to come and tell me that it's going to be warmer next year, and educate us on this. So maybe I'm missing the boat on this, but I just don't feel like we should be paying for full-time service for someone just to go out and educate people on the climate change.
Questions or comments on this proposal? Councilwoman Washington.
I do. I've got a comment, and I may have a question for Director Lopez, if you wouldn't mind coming forward. I read this, and I too had questions about whether or not this was an environmental educator position, as you described. But in my conversation with Director Lopez, I came to understand it's not an educator position as much as it is a risk manager position, that we spend a lot of time preparing for disasters, and we have folks on staff who are there to do disaster planning and to help in the response for disasters. Primarily, certainly there's the first responders who rescue individuals, and then there's the people who are preparing for risks to property and how we respond. But we haven't spent a lot of time thinking about risk management on people, and what do we need to do to get ourselves prepared to respond to these kinds of disasters. And they might not come, as a tsunami or whatever. I know we don't have tsunamis, but sort of how do we think about the infrastructure and preparing for disasters on human. And I think that's more what this job is. And I think I need Director Lopez to either tell me I'm full of hot water or increasing hot air, or I'm joking.
Okay.
I won't make it an or.
No, Director Lopez, I did visit with Councilperson Washington today, and previously, I think part of what's gotten lost in this, it's like talking about doing education, but an easier way to frame this message might be about what this position is about. We have an emergency management plan for infrastructure. So when we have an emergency for infrastructure, we have that plan. What we don't have is a plan for emergency for people. We can have emergency responders and that, but what we're talking about is the emergency management plan for people when we have flooding, when we have to move the elderly from someplace, so that when that occurs, we know how to respond automatically in the community. We know where the people who are most vulnerable are. We know. And I think one of the testifiers gave this example, and I was working with Douglas County Health Department in that recent issue they had. Most of the people impacted by that issue with the air pollution that needed to evacuate were non-English speaking. And so they didn't have materials, they didn't have any communication methods to get out, to get people to evacuate, or to understand what's going on. And that's, a real clear example. But when we have a lot of elderly in certain areas or in long-term cares, how are we going to handle that if we have flooding or power outages? It's much different than the infrastructure that we deal with. And I've worked with emergency management out, in different areas where we've had floods and tornadoes. And actually I worked up in Pilger when all of that was happening. So it's a much different plan for us to be able to address the human needs that go on. So I hope that sheds a little bit more light on what this is. It's really, and I understand what Councilperson McGinnis is saying, but it's really not about an educator going out and talking to people about climate change. It's really bringing all these entities together and making sure that Lincoln has a responsive plan. That's what this is really about. And so I appreciate the opportunity to hopefully clarify a little bit of that.
Thank you. Councilman Beckius.
Since I have Director Lopez up here, Director Lopez, this is currently a 0.25 FTE.
We have a 0.25 FTE position vacant.
Okay.
And then we would be taking it incrementally from other existing
Okay.
areas.
So this is not a current employee, but rather a new position that you would fill.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilwoman Washington.
I just have a clarifying question. Director Lopez, something that you just said. So I was thinking this was a quarter-time position that was existing,
It is.
and then you just said you were going to take from other part-time
Well,
positions?
we're not asking for additional funding. We're allocating from some of our other areas like food and water where it's appropriate, that we can allocate some of that resource into this position because it would be addressing some of those needs.
So you're creating 3/4 of an FTE,
Right,
but you're using existing funding from multiple
Yes.
programs?
yes.
Yes. All right, thank you.
Thus, if this position were to be eliminated, it would not be a reduction in the budget.
No.
Very good. Thank you.
Other questions or comments on this proposal? Anything else, Councilman McGinnis?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to
Moving.
proposal number 5. Transfer $1 million from general fund reserves in fiscal year 22-23 to the Fast Forward Fund for business recruitment, retention, and expansion. Councilman McGinnis.
Yes, this was brought forward on behalf of a few of us that also said that we will start to replenish back the Fast Forward Fund. So that's why I brought this forward at this point, so we can get it replenished.
Questions or comments? Anyone? Councilwoman Washington.
I support that. I'm one of the council members who, I think most of us, all of us, said that we wanted to replenish the Fast Forward Fund, but I also want to make sure that we're backing this up with what the other thing we said was that we would be looking at the criteria and reviewing the criteria and coming up with clear criteria that is well publicized so everyone knows who's available or who's eligible. So I just want to make sure we do the
No,
second piece.
I agree, we need to get together and come up with a little better rules and regs for this one.
Other questions or comments? Councilwoman Raybold.
And I certainly support everything Councilwoman Washington said, that yes, we are supportive of replenishing the fast forward funds and to revise and revisit the criteria as we have the right to do that, and to make sure that we are funding not only job creators, but housing creators, affordable housing creators. So I think that's a fundamental twist on something that we would like to see when we revisit the criteria.
Councilman Beckius.
Thank you. I would just like to say that I think that this comes upon an appropriate time as the Lincoln Partnership for Economic Development continues to embark upon its strategic plan, and I will be taking my guidance from that strategic plan as to ongoing best investments for the Fast Forward Fund. I think now's a good time to hone in on that process and use that as a directive force for these dollars. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions on this issue, proposal? I would just say, as the I support this as well. I think, as someone already said, that was the intent, I think, of the majority of us, if not all of us, when we used the funds this year. And as the introducer of that proposal, I certainly, it was my intent to support this and make sure that we would help replenish it. It had not been used for a number of years, and I just want to put that back on the record as well. And so it is a good economic development tool, and I do think we need to revisit the criteria, and we'll be happy to help do that as well. So thank you for introducing this proposal, Council Member McGinnis. Okay, moving right along. Our last proposal, number 6, submitted by Council Member Washington, to add $100,000 from general fund reserves for fiscal year 22-23 to the LTU Watershed Capital Improvement Program to fund an environmental impact analysis of development on the upper watershed of Salt Creek within the planning horizon of the 2050 Comprehensive Plan. Councilwoman Washington.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I introduced this at the first amendment session last month, and I just wanted to reiterate the purpose of this. I know that we're working on a watershed drainage criteria manual, and this is not the same as that. When we were discussing the wilderness crossing proposal earlier this spring, one of the things that became evident to me in all of the research I did and all the testimony presented by residents of Lincoln is that we don't really actually have a handle on the impacts if we were to build out completely to 2050. And beyond that, there are areas that are outside the 3-mile radius of the planning and permitting area for Lincoln that also has an impact on the upper watershed of Salt Creek, which will eventually have an impact on Lincoln. And I'm not looking to move rules and regs out beyond the 3-mile, but I am looking to set Lincoln up to be more successful and to be the most successful and responsive we can be into the future. And I think it's important to look at that analysis for what does it look like if we develop to 2050, those boundaries, and we take information from Nebraska Department of Natural Resources or the NRDs and say, you have more information about what's happening in the upper watershed than what we actually have responsibility for. Can we all sit down and think about what are the impacts of all of the kinds of development, not just residential development or industrial, but on ag changes, ag practices and ag changes and things like that. So that's the purpose of this, so that we're more resilient in the future and we know what's going to potentially happen and we can plan for it. And if we can plan for it, we can usually mitigate some of the worst impacts.
Councilman McGinnis.
Yes, thank you, Councilperson Washington, for bringing this forward. I like the way you talk about this being a holistic whole area and how we're going to grow and how it look fully built out. And I think part of this thing is you said you're willing to go beyond the 3-mile limit, and that's, you have to on a lot of watersheds. Yeah. I mean, you have to look at the whole watershed, but I think this whole look into it would be very helpful, and look at it as a way that maybe we can develop a different way. Also, maybe we will, maybe we'll want to use a pump station one day, you know. There might be other ideas out there, but this is more of a far-reaching, what's out there, what are we going to have to avoid, and what is going to be some of the hurdles if we do start moving way out. So I'm all for working on this with you.
Other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none. All right. Well, this concludes our additional submitted budget. Oh, yes, Councilwoman Rabel? Yes.
Could I interject? We had a discussion, three of us out in the hallway, about one of the issues that we had struggled with at our last meeting, and that was the visiting nurses program and making it a universal nursing program. And I think we did not see it on this list because I think we've had other discussions, and I think there's been an outreach to Director Lopez on this, and we all agree we want to be supportive of this program, but we also want to see what is the baseline of Lincoln, Nebraska, and what are our goals? What are the benchmarks of the numbers that impact Lincoln, and how we can see success, that we have reduced maybe infant mortalities or reduced postpartum depression, but how, in order for us to do that, we have to have a baseline of numbers for Lincoln, Nebraska, and I think the health department probably does have that. And so I think that's something that's really important, since it seems like we are going to move forward on that program, but we talked that we should have stakeholders that would be participating on this program to make sure we establish the right criteria and benchmarks. We know that there's other communities out there that have implemented this, and it has been well received and recognized, but we want to focus on what are the goals for Lincoln, Nebraska. And as an aside, we know, because place matters and the mapping, we know that there's certain areas of our city that need additional resources to help improve the health outcomes. And so we're hoping, as we work through that, with Director Lopez's guidance and other, best practices that other communities have done, that we can incorporate that. But we want to see some benchmarks, and we threw that maybe the city council member that's on the Board of Health should be actively participating in some of those meetings as we look and review those type of criteria to make it as successful of a program as possible, and that's something that we can proudly show. We've increased or decreased these numbers by implementing this. So that's one thing that we've asked a lot of questions, but we didn't quite hear what benchmarks do we hope to have for the city of Lincoln that can make us all proud.
Councilman McGinnis.
And, you know, I was the one that first brought this forward to, I guess, get rid of the program to start with. Had a nice talk with Director Lopez, and she was really ensuring and helpful about describing this program to me a lot better than what it's been described to me in the past. So I think part of this, I say benchmarking or whatever, could almost be a mini workshop where we can all get down and talk about the details of what this is going to entail and what it's going to look like. So, and I would like to put that on our Director of Health and our City Council member that's on the Health Board, that if they could maybe put together some type of mini workshop or something, we can spend a couple hours and go through it all. And I think a lot of us would like to sit down and do that. We have a better understanding. Overall, I think this program's a good idea. It's just how's it going to be brought forward, paid for, and what are the results that we're looking for are probably the main questions.
Other questions or comments?
We're giving Councilman James Michael Bowers something to do.
I'm in full support of this program and will gladly talk about the benefits of universal home visitation anytime, any place. Let that be on the record.
We never would have guessed. Exactly. Yes. Well, I would just add, unless anybody else has a comment, and I sent Director Lopez a very quick reply to one of her replies to a lot of questions that were happening. That what gave me the most pause was the 9 FTEs, and I understand why it would take 9, but in a time where, and I talked to Councilman Bowers as well, because I knew about his passion for this, but again, for me it was, and I told my colleagues, was the addition of 9 in a time where we don't know if we're on the verge of a recession or not, and so many people are having to suck it in, so to speak, and I just didn't feel it was responsible for city government to launch such an aggressive program for people who are not indigent, and so that's what was giving me the most pause, and so I was trying to keep up with my colleagues and Margaret Reese columns to see what was happening, and so I know it is an important program, and so I've never doubted that, just to be clear, but I wish we could start with less than 9, and I would just ask perhaps if we want a workshop or some sort of more specific benchmarks, maybe that's something we consider as an amendment to the budget bill in some fashion, so that all of us are held accountable and make sure that we do our part and everyone does their part. Just something to think about perhaps as we move forward. So with that, thank you, Councilwoman Raybould, for bringing up the issue. Are there any other items or comments or blurbs that anyone would like to say, or any comments from the directors at all? Well, with that, I do want to thank the city staff, particularly the finance staff, John Carlson, everyone, directors, everybody that's here for their hard work for getting us here today. And we certainly appreciate all of it. So with that, we are adjourned for at least 5 minutes until we start the directors meeting at 2 p.m. Thank you all very much.